lethal.
I'm surprised you haven't heard about me. You know, I got a bad reputation, and sometimes I just go nuts like now.
Because the magic is back.
Hey, you all right, man?
Yeah, I'm okay. Where were you, man? You're my partner or what? Why didn't you follow me down?
Yeah, why didn't you follow him down? Shut up, I'm 7 floors up!
Lethal Weapon 2.
You go first, I'm really too old for this.
You go first, I'll cover you.
Eeny, meeny, miny.
Good police work, officer.
Come on.
No.
Back to my place. Hey, I'll even cook.
You're lucky. I have to live with that.
You're not gonna make it.
I'm gonna make it.
You know, there's not enough room.
You were right, you know. Yeah, there wasn't enough room.
Lethal Weapon 2. This time, they're not taking any crap.
Welcome to one and all. We're back in the car for episode 238 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you for spending some of your very steamy afternoon with me here in New York. Once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. Today is the 35th anniversary of what is generally regarded to be one of the best sequels ever made. And we all know that you're never sure whether something is worthy of being turned into a franchise. There are certain films where it seemed to have a definitive conclusion. They make a sequel. Does it work? Does it not work? But today is the 35th anniversary of the release of Richard Donner's terrific follow-up to easily top 3 best buddy films ever made, Lethal Weapon. The film in question, of course, is Lethal Weapon 2. Another Gen X standard. They both are. Not so much Lethal Weapon 3, it's not nearly as good. But Lethal Weapon 2 is a bit of an outlier in that the Rotten Tomatoes score, for whatever it's worth, it means that the critical reception for Lethal Weapon 2 is actually better than the first one. It's a couple of percentage points higher. I mean, that's, within the margin for error if we're going to talk polling. But it shows that the general sense was that this was a film of significant quality. This was not a cash grab. This was not Speed 2 years later. I'll tell you, at top 5 greatest, not really worst, quotes ever. Jason Patric, who I love the guy in The Lost Boys. He was terrific in Rush, movie about drug addiction with Jennifer Jason Leigh and cops getting involved. He is a fine actor. Love the movie Sleepers, where he plays the central role. But when he was asked why he wanted to do Speed 2 Cruise Control, came out 3 years after the original, which is an absolute all-time action movie classic. Top 10 for sure. Some people would even have it in the top 5. Do not attempt to grow a brain. Dennis Hopper playing crazy. Nobody did it better. Maybe Carly Simon was singing about Dennis Hopper with Nobody Does It Better. But Speed 2 Cruise Control, Jason Patric was asked about Keanu. He didn't want to do it. And you have Sandra. And what interested you in the project? And Jason Patric said, I loved the script. And I like the fact that it wasn't just a cash grab. Plot twist. It was. But Lethal Weapon 2 was not a cash grab. Lethal Weapon 2 was a well thought out story that feels as if it takes place within a reasonable time frame from the original. And the character of Martin Riggs has softened. And I don't see that as the film either cutting corners or making excuses or sacrifices or saying, well, we don't need the character to be such a live wire. No. I believe that the events of the first film have softened Martin Riggs just a little bit, just a touch. He can still dispense pain and can still absorb enormous amounts of punishment. But his worldview is not the same. The first movie, he goes probably 75% of it okay if he dies. First, he's suicidal, and then he's acting like a daredevil because deep down, he can't deal with the loss of his wife. And something that this movie does, I think, beautifully. Some people might say, oh, it's bullshit. But they tie in the main plot of this film. The villains are South Africans. And They're just really rotten, awful people. And they tie in what we learn about Victoria Lynn Riggs, Martin Riggs, Mel's character's wife in the first film, that she unfortunately died similar to the way that we're led to believe that Harry Callahan's bride passed in the original Dirty Harry sometime before the events of that film, as Harry tells it. And it's really the only window into the soul of Harry Callahan that we really get in that film. Because Lethal Weapon, you get a lot of Martin Riggs bearing his soul, and he's at the end of his tether. But Clint Eastwood's Harry Callahan in Dirty Harry just has that one moment where his partner's wife thinks he's married, and he was married, so it's not like her information was completely ridiculous, but she didn't know that his wife had passed. And he just says she was driving home late one night and a drunk crossed the center line. There was no reason for it, really. Martin Riggs' beloved bride, Victoria Lynn Riggs, died in a very similar fashion, and we learn this in the first film. But what we learn in Lethal Weapon 2 further is that these South African pieces of human excrement, they pretty much bumped her off. They had a hand in her death. It was not an accidental death. And learning that, I remember when I saw the movie, my dad and I saw it opening weekend. I was 15. I was in shock. I was not expecting there to be any kind of a connection with that to the first film, but it works. It doesn't feel like pandering to the audience. In the same fashion as Die Hard with a Vengeance, here's a little trivia, Die Hard with a Vengeance turns into a buddy film, right? Bruce Willis and Samuel Jackson. But Die Hard with a Vengeance was originally supposed to be set on a boat. It was supposed to be set on a boat, except for the fact that Under Siege came out and they just didn't want to do it. The story that they had prepared for Die Hard 3 was so close to Steven Seagal, Tommy Lee Jones, Gary Busey, Under Siege. Speaking of Gary Busey, Lethal Weapon, Mr. Joshua. It was so close, so they found a different script. They found a screenplay called Simon Says, written by John Hensley, who ended up having a terrific career. I mean, really, really impressive writer. Simon Says had nothing to do with Die Hard. At all. Nothing. It was about a mad bomber named Simon terrorizing Lower Manhattan, mostly, and a New York City cop and a Good Samaritan who team up to try to stop him. Well, when the original idea for Die Hard 3, which was going to be Die Hard on a boat, 80% of the plot beats were the same as Under Siege. There was going to be a nuke, and John McClane had to... No. So they took Simon Says, reappropriated it. And as part of the reappropriation, the character of Simon, who in the original screenplay by John Hensley, I don't think you ever get his last name. His name is Simon Gruber in the movie. And he's the brother of Hans Gruber, everybody's favorite fucking villain, played by Severus Snape himself, Alan Rickman. Hans Gruber. So Jeremy Irons in Die Hard 3, Simon Gruber, well, maybe they're going after McClane because you killed his brother. And then later in the movie, when McClane actually has a few words with Simon Gruber, said, yeah, I killed your brother. And Simon Gruber's like, oh, no. McClane says, hey, Simon, your brother's an asshole. And Jeremy Irons kind of laughs, says, yeah, he was. And they have a chuckle, but meantime, they're trying to kill each other. Those kinds of things sometimes backfire, but in Die Hard with a Vengeance, that was a great twist. And Lethal Weapon 2, just showing how horrendous these motherfuckers are. It works. And Lethal Weapon 2 also benefits from having a live wire in Joe Pesci. And Joe Pesci had kind of been quiet. He hadn't done all that much. He was in Easy Money with Rodney. We all remember him, Raging Bull with Mr. De Niro, and the incredible scenes between the... Keep eating, you fat bastard. Jackie, stop eating. No. Keep eating, you fat bastard. I mean, just all incredible scenes. And then they eventually have the falling out. But Pesci was not on everyone's radar. And it happens sometimes that you have very talented, let's call them character actors, who seem to go below the radar and then come back, and we say, why did they leave? And in the case of Pesci, then he was still, relatively young. What was he, in his early 40s, his late 30s, whatever. And you say, where did he go? He should have been making movies like this. It's like Harvey Keitel, another terrific actor who seemed to go below the radar, made a lot of shitty movies in the 80s, and all of a sudden, he comes back with Reservoir Dogs, Thelma and Louise, and Bugsy in the same year, 1991, and boom. Where did Harvey Keitel go? I don't know where Joe Pesci went, but Joe Pesci in this movie, he kind of, I guess you could say he plays the comic relief, because he does have a lot of laugh lines, but his character is not just there as a figure of fun. Yes, people don't really take him seriously, but he has connections, he knows a lot of people, and he does very dangerous work. His name is Leo Getz. Whatever you want, Leo Getz. Okay. They fuck you at the drive-thru, they fuck you. Classic scene, they fuck you at the drive-thru. Truer words were never spoken. They know you're going to be miles away when you realize you got fucked. They know you're not going to turn around. Hey guys, can I have a gun? No! Sometimes when you introduce an extra element, it doesn't work. In Lethal Weapon 2, the addition of Joe Pesci makes movie magic, in my opinion. Now, if you ask me, is Lethal Weapon 2 better than the first one? No, it's different. Lethal Weapon 1 tells a more well-rounded story, the mysterious elements as to exactly what's going on with the crime situation there, the crime syndicate, Mr. Joshua, what's his deal? And Lethal Weapon 2 is more of a straight-up action film. It has the buddy film elements, now including Pesci, but there are more big set piece action sequences than Lethal Weapon. And Lethal Weapon at times it's a buddy film, but it's not a buddy action comedy. And that's something that bothers me when people misappropriate. Because I understand genre is not absolute, but in the same way that 48 Hours is not an action comedy, it is an action film, a buddy film with comedic asides. In that case, thanks to Eddie Murphy's ability to ad lib. But to call it an action comedy, Beverly Hills Cop is an action comedy. Rush Hour is an action comedy. Those two movies are not Lethal Weapon or Lethal Weapon 2. They're not even Midnight Run. Midnight Run is at least closer to an action comedy. But at the center of that film, you've got Jimmy Serrano, played by the incredible late great Dennis Farina, an absolutely terrifying performance as a mob boss. So that's not really an action comedy, but oh yeah, it's an action comedy. And I even heard people call Lethal Weapon 2 a comedy thriller. You put the word comedy first? Whatever. But Lethal Weapon 2 has so many things going on. But the relationship between the two leads, we saw it in the first film. Danny Glover doesn't dislike Mel. Roger Murtaugh doesn't dislike Martin Riggs at first. It's kind of the other way around. But he doesn't want to work with him because he thinks he's nuts, which he is, and he might get them both killed, which he might. And that's like the sort of running theme of the first movie. But the guys had such great chemistry, and that's not something you can put in a bottle, and you don't know that you have it until we see it on screen. And the camaraderie that they had, especially in the latter sections of the first film, is apparent from first frame to last in this. And the kind of continued laughs with Roger's daughter Rhiann, who has a crush on Martin, and it's just all this kind of great stuff. And the unbelievable sequence in the film where Rhiann makes a TV commercial and the entire family is excited. We're going to get to see this. It's great. And she doesn't tell them it's a commercial for condoms. And Danny Glover's slow burn, his slow motion meltdown when he realizes what they're watching, and a terrific, again, character actor from the 80s and 90s, Jack McGee. He plays, he's like a contractor. He's working on Roger Murtaugh's house. And I feel like he almost is only in the movie for this one moment where he doesn't understand. This guy watched the commercial along with them, and he doesn't understand why is Danny Glover so angry? Why, Mr. Murtaugh, I don't understand why you're so upset. This commercial this is great. It makes me want to go out there and buy rubbers right now. When he says that, Mel Gibson loses it completely, and it looks like Danny Glover, Roger Murtaugh's going to pull out his gun and blow the contractor's brains out. It is absolutely, that's the funniest moment in the film. That and they fuck you at the drive-thru. But ultimately, Lethal Weapon 2, with all of the action sequences and the comedic asides that I say are in there. There are a lot of laughs in the film. The villains are so awful They're so horrible. And their plans are just so disgusting. We don't want them to succeed. And there are movies in this realm where characters die, and we feel it a little bit. But in this movie, there are character deaths that really hurt. And that's what sets this film apart, where there are more comedic beats. There are more scenes tailored to make people laugh than in the first Lethal Weapon. But I do remember a lot of critics at the time saying it's better than the first one. It's so much fun. And my dad loved it. I saw the movie in theaters twice, which is rare. I saw it with him, and I saw it with next door neighbor Matt the following week. Now, 89 was a good summer for movies. That was the summer of Rick Moranis, which is absurd. People under 30 may not even know the name, but Rick Moranis had 3 major studio releases in 1989, one of which he was nominally the lead. He had his name above the titles, but he had Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, name above the titles. Parenthood, he's part of the terrific ensemble. Steve Martin is technically the lead in that film, even though it's ensemble. Very young Keanu Reeves. And Ghostbusters 2. He gives very skillful performances in all 3. He ain't playing the same character. He gives you 3 distinctive characters. Anyway, the idea is that was a really stacked summer for movies. You had Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade. You had Batman. You had Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing. Next Karate Kid. Star Trek V. But it was a big summer for movies. The License to Kill, the Bond film, which did okay worldwide, but it underperformed in the States. And unfortunately, that was the end of Timothy Dalton's only, sadly, 2-film run as James Bond. And I think both of his movies are phenomenal. Living Daylight's my single favorite Bond film by far. I could watch that every day of the week and twice on Sunday. License to Kill is a little dirtier, a little grittier, but still very good. It goes in a different direction. And the always great Robert Davi as a villain. I mean, Robert Davi, I know he's a singer, The Goonies, but Robert Davi in movies of that era never picked up a paycheck. He always gave it everything he had, and I appreciate it. Even in Predator 2, he's in like one scene opposite Roger Murtaugh himself, Danny Glover, as I forgot the character, Mike somebody or other, but he's like a super cop, almost a Mel Gibson type super cop who keeps fucking up and his superiors, ball him out. And Robert Davi plays that character in Predator 2. But Lethal Weapon 2 was a significant box office hit. It feels like it would have been a bigger budget than it was. The production budget was estimated to be somewhere around $30 million, and the movie grossed between 225 and 230 million worldwide. So you start calculating, forget time value of money, and it would be 520. I mean, production budget gross. How many times its production budget did it gross? It grossed 7 times its production budget. That is a huge box office hit. And it is a film that is well remembered by history. It's not one of those, like Beverly Hills Cop 2, you watch it now, it's not good. It's bad. And I love Eddie Murphy, but there is stuff in that movie that is completely, it was unacceptable then, it plays even worse now. The way that he talks to the Brigitte Nielsen character, no good. The only good thing in that movie is Hugh Hefner's cameo. And Eddie Murphy's reaction, because obviously he knew that Hef was it, but the way that Eddie Murphy, when he realizes he's face to face with the man, Hugh Hefner, and he screams, Hef! Hugh Hefner, greatest quote ever. Hugh Hefner had, I think he was engaged to Kimberly Conrad. He ended up having a couple of kids. This is a long time ago. I mean, he was up there in age, but he wasn't, in his 90s. But Hugh Hefner was still in his kind of playing the field phase. And he was asked a legitimate question. This is circa 1990, 91. He was asked a legitimate question. Do you practice safe sex? And he gave, I would say, the best answer. Put the word best in quotes. It's not really the best answer, but he gave the best answer I've ever heard. Best as far as the more you think about it, the dumber it is. So he said he practiced safe sex. And when the anchor, I don't know if it was Jim Murray, it was a CNN anchor, a million years ago, again, 1991. I don't know what the hell he was being interviewed. Maybe the 35th anniversary of Playboy. But his interpretation of safe sex, Hugh Hefner, the women that he had sex with, he was the only guy that they were having sex with. So Yeah, he practiced safe sex. Now, me at age 16 or 17 seeing that, when I tell you I was screaming with laughter, even at that age, I called bullshit. Like, what the fuck kind of answer is that? Is this guy serious? Couldn't he have at least lied and said, oh yeah, of course we use protection? But Beverly Hills Cop 2, no good. Beverly Hills Cop 3, no good. But Lethal Weapon 2 still plays. And I understand Mel Gibson, I don't want to say too much. He's an enormous talent. You know, I was just watching for reference, I was watching a video where Orson Welles is discussing Elia Kazan, who he hated. He absolutely despised Elia Kazan because Elia Kazan did not have to rat out his friends. He did not have to give people's names up to Joe McCarthy. He could have given them the finger and he was probably still going to be able to continue his career. But he chose to be a rat. He chose to literally rat on his friends when there was he wasn't going to lose his career. He didn't even have that. So Orson Welles despised Elia Kazan, but he also pointed out, I'm not going to lie and tell you this guy wasn't an incredible talent. He was a very fine filmmaker. And when he got the Lifetime Achievement Award 25 years ago, these were the things that people were discussing. If you look at the body of work, films like On the Waterfront, he absolutely is worthy. But do we have to honor this guy? And if we do, should we stand up and applaud? And you had people like Steven Spielberg, who's not known as a contentious personality. He wasn't happy about it. But the idea is, for myself, just me, I'm able to separate the artist from the art. And I can say that Mel Gibson has done and said a lot of things that I take issue with. But I can also acknowledge, guy's a great filmmaker and he's a great actor. He's really good. And it's easy to kind of undersell just how talented of a performer he is. But he's funny in comedies and he's played brilliant in dramas. And we know he can handle it and has always been able to handle action scenes like Arnold, like Stallone, like even Bruce Willis. So I don't think the movie, in some quarters, the movie won't play as well because Mel, if you have a problem and you don't ever want to watch Mel, that's fine. For you, then, the movie doesn't play as well because it ain't playing, you're not going to play it. But I'm not going to, in this case, kind of condemn or indemnify the filmmakers. Richard Donner, unfortunately passed. Terrific, by all accounts, great guy. I don't have any axe to grind with Danny, and I certainly love Joe Pesci. And I didn't like the movie The Irishman. He made a comeback after how many years? Over 20 years almost of retirement for The Irishman. Joe Pesci's the only reason to watch that movie. I was very disappointed. I know a lot of critics loved it. I didn't get into it. But Pesci was magnificent. And I'm sorry he didn't win Best Supporting Actor. That's how good he was. Man, that guy is a talent. Even at age, with the prosthetics and the de-aging and all of that, Joe Pesci just fucking killed it in The Irishman. Literally and figuratively. But Lethal Weapon 2 is a terrific sequel. And you notice I didn't go into major spoiler territory. I'll give you a really quick recap. Mel and Danny, Riggs and Murtaugh get involved in this crazy case where these South Africans have hundreds of millions in very high quality counterfeit money and Krugerrands. And they start bumping off members of the police department. They have diplomatic immunity to try to keep Riggs and Murtaugh off their tails. And great actor Joss Ackland kind of plays the ringleader. And another terrific actor, Derek O'Connor, is in the cast. And wonderful actress who I'm surprised didn't have a bigger career, Patsy Kensit, plays a love interest for Mel in the film. And even that works. Mel is still hurting because his beloved Victoria Lynn is gone. But the relationship that develops between him and Rika is the name of the character, and she, I think, works for the bad guys. It develops very sweetly in an almost G-rated way. And I gotta tell you, as a 15-year-old kid who was a little chubby, and seeing Mel Gibson look so diesel and dialed in, and basically 95% naked, him and Patsy Kensit, not only was I jealous of him for the fact that he was in that kind of shape, I was jealous of him because, my God, she is so ridiculously attractive. What the fuck, man? 15-year-old me, what can I tell you? But that's part of it. Mel and Rene Russo in Lethal Weapon 3, also two super attractive people that, well, in the case of Rene Russo, she was a model, and they just look incredible together. And Mel in this movie and Patsy Kensit, they really look great together. And the fact that they had good on-screen chemistry, that's very tricky. Now, I feel, because Mel, similar to Clint Eastwood, he hasn't played that many conventional romantic leads. You want to say What Women Want? Maybe. Maverick opposite Jodie? No. Year of Living Dangerously with Sigourney? Yes. And I feel like they actually had really good chemistry. And again, they look good together. They are very attractive people. And in a world of that film, the romance could have kind of sunk the movie, but it works because Mel is so sincere. And Sigourney, she could have phoned that role in because there's not that much on the page. She gives a really good performance. But this movie, Joe Pesci has enough to do, and there is enough where he is at risk. And as much as the guys can't stand him, they kind of tolerate him, have a few laughs, but they really don't like him. He's a scumbag, he's a criminal. But he grows on them slowly, and by the end, when his life is in danger, you get the sense that these guys are not just going to let him die, that they're going to go the extra mile. We can't let Leo get, this is not okay. Even if you say, well, he's also a criminal. No. He's had our back a few times. He's helped. No, this is not going to happen this way. And without spoiling the ending, it's kind of a running theme in the movie that the bad guys have diplomatic immunity. And at a certain point in the film, Joss Ackland also played a foreign minister in his next film, The Hunt for Red October. That's a movie I'm probably going to have to talk about on the channel. What a great adaptation of a runaway, humongous best-selling novel. Like, that was an insane. Everyone was reading The Hunt for Red October circa 1988 or 89. But in that movie, he plays a foreign minister, the Russian version of Secretary of Defense. And he has a number of scenes with the United States Secretary of Defense, played by another phenomenal supporting character actor, Richard Jordan, who was originally cast as Dr. Charles Nichols in The Fugitive and shot 90% of the scenes that he was in before he became too sick to work, and they had to recast it and shoot a ton of new stuff. This would have been a huge story today in the internet age, but when this movie was shot, The Fugitive in 92, it wasn't that big. It ended up being Gerwin Crabb, the terrific Dutch actor. But Richard Jordan plays the Secretary of Defense in The Hunt for Red October, and for most of the movie, it seems that Joss Ackland's Russian foreign minister is just giving him fucking bullshit, and he's fucking with Richard Jordan's Secretary of Defense, and at the very end, Richard Jordan just basically, without saying it, gets to give Joss the old double middle-fingered salute without really doing it. It is great. But he was a terrific actor, and he has moments throughout the film where they keep being able to say diplomatic immunity, and Mel and Danny can't do anything about it. But finally, there is a moment where he says diplomatic immunity, and Danny Glover's line reading of, "It's just been revoked," chef's kiss. Can't do it any better. And Lethal Weapon 2 is streaming on Max, I believe, and it's free on other apps. You could find it on Pluto and Tubi. There are other apps. You shouldn't have to pay anything. Whatever you have, that you could probably find it somewhere. If you haven't seen it, it's really good. It is a terrific sequel. It's not the best sequel ever. Aliens, James Cameron, and Terminator 2, I think, are the best sequels ever. But this one is right there. And you also have to remember that Lethal Weapon 2 are just not as good as Alien, Aliens, or Terminator, and especially Terminator 2. But for sequels, Lethal Weapon 2 is terrific, and the guys are so good together. I can't emphasize enough how great the chemistry has always been between Mel Gibson and Danny Glover. They really seem like best friends, and it helps to sell the movie and the story. Lethal Weapon 2, directed by Richard Donner, starring Mel Gibson, Danny Glover, Joss Ackland, Derek O'Connor, Joe Pesci, Tracy Wolff, Darlene Love, and a whole bunch. Oh, and Jack McGee in a supporting role, as a hysterical supporting role as a contractor working on Roger Murtaugh, Danny Glover, house. This has been episode 238 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you for spending some of your steamy Sunday afternoon here with me in New York. If you checked out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch up with this episode on the audio platforms such as Spotify or iTunes, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with episode 239 real soon. Till then, peace.